Hi, I'm Dr. Fred DiDomenico. What was my name?
And I'm Dr. Douglas G. Siena.
And this is Resurrecting Our Freedom podcast. And in a world where our rights feel like they're being pulled out from under us like a carpet from under our feet, we're here to bring you the information, the confidence, and the courage to be able to stand up for your rights, say we're not going to take this shit anymore, and we have God-given human and constitutional rights that were given to us to live in a free world. And that's why we're here, to bring you the information, the leadership, and the power to say we're standing strong.
I love that.
Yeah.
If you lose your health freedoms, you lose all your freedoms.
Man, you lose that, you lose everything. So what's really cool about today is we're going to go over all the well, not all of them, but many of the contradictions about the COVID vaccination. I know that I coach doctors all over the country. Patients are asking, this is the question. Like, mask wearing isn't even an issue. We're so far beyond that that now we're into something that's much bigger that can change the world in a very dark direction very fast. And we're going to take you out of the darkness into the light on this one.
Love that.
So let's get started real quick. First of all, what I think is interesting is Dr. Tony Fauci, who's supposed to be the leader of the free world, yeah, right, admit that he lied to the general public and said he once told us that herd immunity is 60 to 70% exposure. Now he's saying, you know what, the general public couldn't really handle that. So I told you what I thought you could handle, but what it really is 80 to 90% herd immunity. So when do they decide what we can handle as opposed to the truth? And now what he's saying is, oh, by the way, in the very near future, expect that you're going to need to be vaccinated to be able to take any flight or travel. By the way, he is invested in the Moderna vaccination. Isn't that fascinating?
This is the same Dr. Fauci who said at one point that wearing a mask is just a symbol to make you feel better about the virus. Is that the same Dr. Fauci?
I think that is. That's the same Dr. Fauci that we saw on the David Martin podcast. Look up Resurrecting Our Freedom, David Martin, that actually genetically created the SARS-CoV-2 in 2013 and shipped it to Wuhan in 2015. So is that the same Tony Fauci?
Interesting.
Fascinating.
Well,
I also want to share, I know, Doug, you have a lot of cool stuff you want to go over, and I found this article, and I apologize that I don't have the source with me today, but it's from a Dr. John Reed, and here it is right here. It says, I have a PhD in virology and immunology. That means he studies viruses, right? I am a clinical lab scientist and have tested 1,500 supposed positive COVID samples collected here in Southern California. And these are universities, research labs in universities of California. When my lab team and I tested through Koch postulates, Koch, that's when they actually isolate a virus from the blood of an infected human. That's Koch's postulate. And they observed under electron microscope, really powerful microscope that can see viruses. They found no COVID in any of the 1,500 samples. So they were sent 1,500 blood samples of supposed positive COVID. They couldn't find COVID anywhere. What they found were 1,500 samples of influenza A and influenza B. So they found influenza, but not a single case of COVID. Then they sent those samples to Stanford, Cornell, and to a few University of California labs, and they found the same result. No SARS-CoV-2. They found all influenza A and all influenza B. So they go, what the heck is going on? Let's contact the CDC. So then they spoke to the CDC and asked for viable samples of COVID. The CDC said they could not provide it. The CDC refused to provide or could not provide samples of SARS-CoV-2. So they've come to the firm conclusion that of all the research and lab work, COVID-19 must be imaginary or fictitious. So out of the 225,000 deaths, they say were COVID deaths, now they died with comorbidities. So these are people that basically, first of all, it's overdiagnosed, and they die with influenza, heart disease, cancer, comorbidities. What's comorbidities mean? Comorbidities mean you would have died of the disease. So check this out then. We at the 7 universities did the lab test, 1,500 samples. They're now suing the CDC for COVID-19 fraud because the CDC has yet to provide one single sample of SARS-CoV-2 virus to these research laboratories. They won't send them. CDC refuses to send them. Now, on the 4 research papers that describe the genomic extracts, meaning the genetic structure of COVID-19, all 4 papers that were written on COVID-19 describe small bits of RNA, 37 to 40 base pairs. That's 37. That's what base pairs when DNA matches DNA. When a virus has 30,000 to 40,000. So those are fragments of RNA virus when a virus has 30 to 40,000 base pairs. So there's no proof of SARS-CoV-2 at this point. So anyway, what they're dealing with is really another flu strain. And, now he goes into, he believes there's another agenda. So that's fascinating.
That's crazy. So just real quick, a vibe off of that, and we can send this off if our trusted producer can do this. We have a death map of this last season of the flu season. And I showed you before we aired this, and it's virtually green. So I'd love to attach that onto the podcast.
Well, they don't know what green means.
Green means there's no deaths. So you'll see it. It was a template on there which will show you the scale, and so it'll become very obvious when we attach it to our podcast. So
yeah. So basically, there were no diagnosed influenza deaths in about 60% of the United States.
When you say no, there would be minimal. That's it. The green is minimal.
Okay.
So it's not 0. That would be an exaggeration. But the point is this. What happened to the death rate from the flu all of a sudden? What magically happened in this particular year that flu virus deaths went away?
Well, in the other 40, I thought the other 40% were minimal. So there's 60% I thought were almost nil. 40% were minimal.
I'm just going to say minimal. I don't know if it's almost nil. But either way, the bottom line is it's dramatically down, as is pneumonia deaths, by the way.
So what this matches is the fact that when you look at all these positive tests, 1,500 that were tested, and they all came out, none of them had SARS-CoV-2. They all had influenza. So now what's happening is the diagnosis is changing. Now, here's the problem. Here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about vaccination, which we knew from the beginning this was always the higher agenda. They've been trying to, way back in the Hillary Clinton days, Obama days, were trying to pass mandatory vaccination laws now in California. Obviously, public schools, mandatory vaccination. They tried to do it in New Jersey. People stood up, stomped it down. And now what they're doing recently is it just passed that a child 11 years old does not have to tell that a medical doctor gets to decide if a child can choose to be vaccinated, and the parents won't know. So a medical doctor can vaccinate your child legally without parental consent, a minor, and they don't have to tell the parents that your child was vaccinated.
How creepy is that a medical doctor would be in the room with their child all by him or herself? And not only that, but they also are going to alter the EOB. For our listeners, that means the explanation of benefits. So when they bill the insurance for said vaccination, they're going to shield that from the parents. So the parents will never get an explanation of benefits in the mail. So the parents literally will never know what drug is
injected into their kid. Now,
at 11 years old.
Yeah, now that is absolutely insane. I mean, it's above beyond constitutional rights. That's God-given rights. So the whole thing is, and the reason we bring that up now is because this has always been a big part of the agenda. And this is what we're going to get into. So now we're going to go into, okay, what are the challenges of the vaccinations that are already being given around the world?
Right. So we're going to include this in our podcast. So what I have here, actually, my son-in-law has sent this to me, Dr. Harbin. This is the actual fact sheet from Pfizer. So literally, you can go on to Pfizer, and it says fact sheet for Pfizer. And so let me just read this right here. It says the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine is a vaccine, and here's the word, may. It doesn't say will. It says may prevent you from getting COVID-19, which we actually don't even know what that is because it's never been sequenced,
isolated,
as you've just said. Here's the statement, which we're going to say this, and we're going to let it land on people. There is no U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved vaccine to prevent COVID-19. Hard stop.
Right. So the FDA says that there's no vaccination that will stop COVID-19. I thought that was the point
Right.
of vaccination. So, and what they're saying is what also is being said is, and I don't have the citation here, but Fauci even said, and the CDC said, that the vaccination will not prevent the spread of COVID-19.
Right.
Why are we doing this experimental vaccination? And they're actually concerned because, and I'm going to get into this, the Pfizer and Moderna, now what they have is Pfizer has a synthetic coronavirus. So what's mean is genetically altered, which means, and what they do, they inject you with this foreign body because it's synthetic. So that means it's not natural, which means your immune system go, what the hell is that? And then it's going to create a bunch of antibodies to attack it. Now what they're looking for is do you have an immune response? And if you have immune response, it must work.
Right.
But the problem is this is synthetic genetic material. So the RNA will go in and turn into DNA. Now you have synthetic DNA that your immune system will recognize as foreign, which now means your immune system starts attacking your own cells.
Right, which means autoimmune cases are going to skyrocket.
Cancers
are going to. And again, this is an emergency use vaccine, so there are no cancer studies on this vaccine.
There's no long-term studies and the
There's
short-term
studies. Well, there's actually scant animal studies, which did not turn out well.
Well, they did some early animal studies, did not turn out well. Right. A lot of the animals died. So now the FDA says, you know what? We're not going to do animal studies on these vaccinations. So how do they know what effect the vaccination is going to have? Okay, well, first of all, the Pfizer and AstraZeneca and all these, they have indemnity, which means they don't have to be liable for any of the side effects. And so I have this right here. This was actually an interview. Here you go. Simultaneously, in the true spirit of transparency, Pfizer's UK management spoke to journalists at a press conference, but refused to explain why the company needed indemnity. And here's a quote. We're not actually disclosing any of the details around any aspects of the indemnity agreement and specifically around the liability causes. So they were asked, excuse me, Pfizer, why do you want complete release of all liability? We're not going to talk about that. And then what happens is now the medical professionals, doctors and nurses, first responders, 55% of the New York Fire Department, they don't want to get it. The police, thousands of doctors and nurses around the country, all the frontline docs. They say, you know what, we're going to wait. And it's all over the news, at least the news that we see, not mainstream media, of all the doctors that are getting sick, the one that passed out. I'll give you another story in a second. So they're saying, well, we want transparency. And now I read an article today out of, I forget the name of the journal. But they said that, we're not going to release what these real side effects are until all the case studies are done. Moderna says those case studies, the earliest will be done is June 2021. Pfizer says we may not release what all the potential dangers are till 2022. Well, so by that time, millions and millions of people around the world will be vaccinated.
Right. So not only that, but the idea of how many people who have a vaccine reaction actually are reported is like, 1%? So obviously, if they had liability for reactions from the vaccine, profitability would go away in a heartbeat. In fact, they would be so far indebted to the American people and people worldwide. When we actually calculate how many, not only reactions, but possible deaths from cancers and autoimmune diseases and anaphylactic shocks, it is going to literally be mind-blowing. It'll be beyond our capacity to even understand it.
Well, and the medical profession understand this. So here was out of a quote out of another article, right? The wobbly frontline healthcare appear to be growing weary amidst the chaos. Chief medical officers for England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. So they've already started vaccinating on a large scale, and now they're seeing all these reactions. Now they're going, wait a second, we've already given a first round dose to a hell of a lot of people. We're getting some really bad reactions. We want to slow down before we go to another dose.
Right.
Well, that pisses off Pfizer, right? Because they want to do a 2-dose plan. So in their phase 3 study for COVID-19 vaccine was designed to evaluate the vaccine's safety and efficacy following a 2-dose schedule separated by 21 days. So here's what they say. Wait a minute. You promised we could give 2 doses.
Right. And then they went back and said, well, 1 dose wouldn't be sufficient to offer immunity.
Yep. There's no data, quote, there's no data to demonstrate the protection after the first dose is sustained after 21 days.
Right.
So they're saying, wait, you can't do this. No, all those reactions, well, we don't know because the efficacy is after 2 doses, which it's already been shown with each dose, the reactions become more severe.
Correct. Not that they're compounded, actually.
Right.
So not, so it's not additive. And it's all because
There's
of this.
a big word. Say that again.
Compounded.
It's compounded. What's that mean? It's exponentially greater. It's not additive. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. Yeah. It's 1 + 1 = 6. Right. That's compounded.
That's the new math.
Yeah. That's the new math. The new math on vaccinations. That's good. So anyway.
So I have one more thing to say about this vaccine fact sheet. 2 more things, actually.
Got it.
Are you over it? So I just read the one on Pfizer. This is from Moderna. The Moderna COVID-19 vaccine is are you ready for this? Unapproved vaccine. It's an unapproved vaccine that may prevent COVID-19. There is no FDA-approved vaccine to prevent COVID-19. The FDA has authorized the emergency use of Moderna COVID vaccine to prevent COVID in individuals 18 years or older only under the emergency use authorization, which basically means they can get away with anything they want under this emergency.
Exactly. Now, here's the funny thing. 18 years old, they're not even a means of transmission. The average age of COVID death in America is 81. So they want to start vaccinating people at 18. Why? Because what if they do, well, the average death, let's start vaccinating at 70. Well, that eliminates the whole population before 70.
Right.
So we need to do it at 18. Next thing you know, they're going to start doing it with pregnant mothers. Oh, by the way, you got to get because that's where they're now regular vaccination, right?
Right.
They're actually trying to vaccinate fetuses, developing fetuses in the womb.
So let me go through this contraindication, or do you want to do it after you're done with that?
Go for it.
Okay, so this is really interesting because they are already vaccinating pregnant women with the COVID-19. We all agree on that, right? So this is Moderna's contraindications to vaccines. Number 1, people who have allergies. What % of the population nowadays have allergies?
I have no idea, but it's a lot.
It's a lot, right? I don't know. That was a rhetorical question because I don't know what it is.
Who are we supposed to answer? Ask that again. Let's be silent. How many people have allergies? It's a rhetorical question we're not supposed to answer.
No, but it's a lot.
Yeah. Okay, that's a lot.
Probably, by the way, due to vaccines and autoimmune reactions, but it's another story. So we're not supposed to vaccinate people with allergies. There's nobody that I'm aware of who's standing in line with the vaccine. They're not being questioned whether or not they have an allergy. Nobody. No. They're just putting their arm out and getting the vaccine. Number 2, if they have a fever, if they have a bleeding disorder, that means even an ulcer, if they are immunocompromised or on a medicine that affects your immune system. There's another rhetorical question. How many elderly people do you know are on some sort of a corticosteroid? Like a lot. Can you say a lot?
A lot.
A lot. Yet they're still getting the vaccination. Am I popping?
Nope.
Okay.
All good.
Secondly, this is actually a 5th one.
Let me comment on allergies for a second.
Sure.
Here was a Boston MD suffers from severe allergic reactions after Moderna vaccine. I really want people to take this seriously because he had an anaphylactic reaction. Now,
what does that mean?
Anaphylactic means life-threatening. It means your heart rate speeds up. So he went at his heart rate, normally 72, went up to 150. And all of a sudden he couldn't breathe, starts to swell up. It's just a life-threatening condition. So I really want people to take this seriously. Those who have severe reactions. He said, I want them to talk to their doctors, to their allergists. I want them to carry their EpiPen.
That's interesting.
Yeah, isn't EpiPen where you have to like stab your heart and get adrenaline in your body?
In your thigh, yeah.
What's that?
Or your thigh, you do it in your thigh.
Okay. Wasn't that big thing like a Nicolas Cage on that one movie? What was that one movie where he's in prison, Alcatraz? Okay, so anyway, it's like carry your EpiPen because that's how dangerous it can be when you have out. You could literally get the vaccination, keel over, and die.
Of anaphylactic shock.
Anaphylactic shock if you have any allergies. Anyway, so go on.
Versus like just having flu-like symptoms for a week.
Right.
Yeah,
That goes
like
away, which has a 99.94%.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
So a contraindication to this COVID-19 vaccination is pregnancy. And yet I see pregnant women lining up to get this. It says it right here in their fact sheet that pregnancy is prohibited. They've never done a safety study on this COVID-19 for pregnancy.
No.
Not one study. And we are giving out a drug which they have license to give out because they have no liability. So of course they're going to
give it to everybody. Hey, we don't care. So here's the thing on the pregnancy. Let's go through this because they say, well, it's rumor that if you get these vaccinations, you're going to become infertile. And here's the thing. It's Synctin, Syncytin 1, is derived from a HERV, it's human endogenous retrovirus, whatever, is responsible for the development of the placenta in mammals and humans. So here is, because we actually need viruses for normal function. Well, this HERV helps the placenta develop. So what they're saying now is the spike proteins of the SARS viruses. So when you're looking at the synthetic virus that they're putting into the vaccination, it looks like a soccer ball with all these spikes. So the proteins on the spikes mimic the Synctin 1 antibodies. And so what will happen is this will prevent this will prevent the formation of the placenta, which means a woman cannot get pregnant.
Right.
So this is the Pfizer vaccination has this genome that's similar to that virus that forms the placenta, then the genomic structure that forms the placenta. And so now they say, well, you know, there's no research that says this, so.
Well, this is really quick. I won't get into the nerd, but let's talk about what this retrovirus is. That literally means that when we inject a person with a retrovirus, we literally create, in essence, an assembly line of new viruses based upon that injection of that vaccine. So now we're creating these viruses within the human milieu of this type of endogenous structure which prevents pregnancies.
Yeah, endogenous means comes from the inside.
Yeah, thank you.
Could you guys tell us a little bit about like Healthy Viruses 101, just so we can understand? You mentioned that we all need viruses. Tell us why.
Well, that's what builds our immune system, and that's, you know, I'm not an immunologist or a virologist, but we have billions of viruses in us all the time that lead to healthy function.
50% of the human DNA structure is made from or comes from a viral source. Virus is how we transmit genetic information. And I don't know if this is a good analogy, but I happen to be extemporaneously talking to a patient about this virus. And she was an environmentalist. And so I thought to myself, she would get this. So we know that deaths from bee stings, which is an interesting fact, is actually it's epidemic. It's on the rise right now. More and more people are dying from bee stings. I'm Italian. I have to talk with my hands. And so I rhetorically asked my patient this question. Well, do you think because more and more people are dying from bees, should we go ahead and just kill bees off the planet? Should we just eliminate bees? Because thousands of people are dying from bee stings. So should we just eliminate bees from the planet? Obviously, we know that without bees, we die. Without viruses, we die. We somehow demonize the virus. It's not. We need viruses to survive. Viruses that have been on the planet before humankind has been on the planet.
Well, and it's been said that there's 10 to the 30th to the 31st exponential viruses outside, and we have 10 to the 31st viruses inside.
Right.
So to think that one virus is going to take out humanity is ridiculous. 10 to the 31st, that means it's 1 and 31 zeros. So I don't even know what number that is, but that's how many viruses are outside of us and how many viruses are inside of us. Means whatever outside of us is already inside of us, that builds our immune system and keeps us functioning normally. So to think that one virus is going to come in and wipe us all out is absolutely ridiculous.
And how hubris is it to think that we can come up with a vaccine that would imagine
kill
having
that one virus?
or having to come up with 10 to the 31st power number of vaccines.
So God's smarter than we are.
Or we just
God knows way more shit than we do. Okay,
I'm
that's all I know.
I'm
Let's
gonna
sum
have
this
to
whole
go ahead.
podcast up.
That's so true, though, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
How do they say, what is it, Padre, and what is that thing in Italian, you know? Yeah, Spiritu Santo, the Holy Spirit, Padre, the Father, and the Son, and mi hermano, or whatever it is.
you should know that. You were raised a
I
Catholic.
know! Okay, so let's get into more interesting stuff. AstraZeneca. Hey, here is it's called ChAdOx1, recombinant DNA. What's that mean? These are DNA, that's genetic material, formed by laboratory methods. So the AstraZeneca has a genetic recombination, which means they synthetically created DNA to inject into your body. Now, if you have an immune system, it's going to see that, whoa, what's this messed up thing? We've never seen that before. What are they going to do? Attack the crap out of it, right? So now you have all these antibodies, but what's that do? DNA mixed with your DNA, massive autoimmune, massive cancer.
Let's also stop right there. There is no situation in the history of mankind when viruses got somehow magically injected into the bloodstream. Because we have this thing, right? It's called skin. We have a mouth with mucosal layers. We have zonulin junctions in our gut. It's what?
That was a big word. Dude, I have a doctorate. I don't even know what word you just said.
Zonulin junction is a
what is
protein
that?
that keeps people from having a leaky gut syndrome.
Got it.
Wow.
He's obviously done a little more homework than I have.
Okay, let's not get mixed up in the weeds. The point of it is that we are injecting foreign proteins directly into the blood. It's unnatural. It's not a normal case of our development. So the body is going to react in an appropriate way, which is to kill off those things, and that creates an anaphylactic and or autoimmune condition.
That sucks.
Which also involves cancers.
Yes, it does. So let's go into the next. What else does AstraZeneca have? Well, it has this thing called MRC5, Medical Research Council Cell Strain 5. These are fibroblasts, basically tissues from the lungs of 14-week-old aborted Caucasian male fetuses. So a video came out, hey man, this vaccine has aborted male lung tissue in it. So they go, no. So we're going to fact check, because we know all fact checking is true. Right? If it's been fact checked, it's definitely true. Would you agree?
100%.
So here's what they say. Reuters, this is from Reuters. So it doesn't really have, no, AstraZeneca, nope. Doesn't have any lung tissue of male aborted fetuses in the AstraZeneca vaccine. However, the cell lines of male aborted fetal tissue are used to develop the vaccines, including COVID-19. So it turns out it is used, but guess what? Then what they do is we go through this purification process, so it's not actually in the vaccine, but we make the vaccine with fetal aborted male lung tissue. So how many people do they want to vaccinate?
Yeah, the whole world.
How many is that? 7.8 billion?
Right.
So how many aborted fetuses does it take to make 7.8 billion vaccinations twice? So that's 15.6 billion doses of vaccinations.
So I can say the comment that they're going to say is
that's big business right there.
What they're going to
Planned
say
Parenthood.
is, here's the rebuttal to that, because I've already heard this rebuttal, is they're taking the genetic cell lines from these set aborted fetuses, and they're now reproducing them in a petri dish, so they don't have to abort more fetuses. So they're just recreating the cell lines from these said fetuses.
Got it. So there'll be no more fetuses ever used, no more fetal tissue ever.
I'm just telling you what they're
Nope, we
saying.
got Petri dishes. We don't need that. Nope, it won't happen. Yeah, is that a rhetorical statement? I don't know. Maybe we should pause.
I shouldn't laugh at this because it's really actually
Right? Never going to happen again. Nope. Oh, but we do use to make them. But, we're reproducing these artificial ones, which now we're going to inject artificial stuff. So my question is, what are your religious beliefs? What's your spirituality? It's not injecting in your body, but if you get it, that's how it was made. So I'm not making a decision for you. I'm just saying, what is your belief system? So now with all this, check this out. So now the medical profession knows that. So what are they saying? I think we want to wait. Not only are the people that are in our same profession have gotten that or having adverse reactions, but we kind of know this information, so we want to wait. So what do they want to do? Oh, no. We don't want people to wait. So we're doing a rushed propaganda that will be kicking into gear behind the scenes in an attempt to stop the widespread vaccine hesitancy erupting within the medical community. So what we're going to do is we're just going to market. We're going to start this whole marketing campaign that tells you that you're safe. So there's unanswered questions, there's lack of transparency, there's questionable safety profiles, there's absent liability and limited trial endpoints of the experimental vaccines that deserve public debate before premature assumptions of widespread uptake are made by health officials and national leaders.
That's crazy.
So what's that mean? Oh, we're just going to market. No, we better start our marketing plan because, there's too many people that are saying, wait a minute, we don't have any animal trials. We're seeing the autoimmune reactions. We're seeing the anaphylactic reactions. We understand all the constituents and the process going into these. I don't want to be the first guinea pig.
Right. In fact, what we could do, if our producer would, or if it's possible, we can send out a really quick, short video of literally doctors and experts around the world who are speaking against the mandatory frontline doctors getting this vaccine because of potential safety hazards.
Yeah, I signed a petition today to not make it mandatory.
Perfect.
So here we have, again, the vaccine safety. This is out of Bloomberg prognosis section in November 17, 2020. Vaccine safety unclear until millions get their shots. And so the safety and efficacy is unclear until millions of people. Oh, and then we'll know if it's safe.
Okay, so real quick. So they're talking about acute reactions like anaphylactic shock, like
that's not even
death.
long term.
They're not talking about cancer.
Autoimmune.
I mean, if you smoke a pack of cigarettes today, you're not going to get cancer today, right? It's after a while. So you may have a load of cancer 30, 40 years down the road from younger.
3 to 5.
Imagine
see this a lot faster.
Imagine that. Imagine the skyrocketing amounts of chronic illness that quite frankly,
we're going to see within 3 years.
It is going to be a poop show.
Yeah, there's no question. So now the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, MHRA, initially advised anyone with a history of allergic reaction to not take this. Now here we go. The MHRA urgently seeks an AI, artificial intelligence software tool to be able to have the process to be able to have the ability to process the expected high volume of COVID-19 vaccine adverse drug reactions. Now, the MHRA is in Britain.
Right.
It's in England. So that's just for England alone that they're looking for an AI, artificial intelligence software that hasn't been created yet to be able to track all the adverse all the adverse reactions. And this is in England alone. It doesn't include all the other countries.
Right. It's sick.
Yeah. So here's the last thing that I have.
Okay.
Here's out of the Science Journal. This was a headline coming out December 21st, 2020, out of Science Journal. Suspicions grow that nanoparticles, that means really small particles, nano is 10 to the negative 9. So that means how small is it? It's 1 billionth, I would believe, of a millimeter. right? That means if you take a millimeter, which I can't even do with my fingers, got to be a billion section of those. So what's that mean? It's pretty friggin' small. Nanoparticles in Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine trigger rare allergic reactions. So why are they injecting these small particles? Well, we already know that the main reason for these types of vaccinations are for contact tracing. And this is the whole reason for 5G. 5G isn't about being wireless. It's about setting up the technology to inject you with digital particles that can track your location anytime, track your behavior, see what you're purchasing. It's also going to monitor all your bank accounts, credit cards, completely financially. And if they don't like what you're doing, they can push a button. They can stop you from traveling. They can see who you're mixing with, right? They can stop your travel. They can push a button with digital currency. That's why we're moving away from cash. Push a button, drain your bank account, and they have total control. This is one of the main reasons, other than profit, for these nanoparticles, these digital particles being injected into you through these vaccinations. Because they are so foreign, that this is partially what's triggering the adverse allergic, the anaphylactic reaction. So people that are getting sick, why? Because you're injecting foreign genetic material and artificial material into your bloodstream that's mixing with your genetics. That means whoever owns the patent, here's a real good rhetorical question for you.
Who's your daddy?
Who's your daddy? Who's your daddy? Because whoever owns the patent on the nanoparticle will own your DNA.
Yep.
They will track you, they will own you, and they will control you. And that's the purpose of the vaccination. So the last episode, we talked about all the contradictions in COVID. The reason there's all the contradictions is because if they don't have a pandemic, why would you get vaccinated? And if you can't get vaccinated, we can't inject these nanoparticles into you. We can't go to one world government. We can't get rid of all the currency. We can't digitally monitor all your actions. We can't control the population.
Yeah, this is really quick. Take a step back and take a 30,000 view of this. So we have a virus which we know has about a 0.1 fatality rate. Is that about it? So 99.9% of the people who are of average age will survive this. We can agree on that. Everybody agrees on that, right? So we just outlined, or you did an amazing job, Dr. Fred, of outlining all of the potential dangers of a vaccine.
This vaccine.
Of this particular vaccine, which we don't, again, we are the human experiment. So how in the world can you get a population that's going to have a survival rate of 99.9% undisputed to take a vaccine that without question has potential side effects? Nobody's questioning it. If they had no side effects, they would have no problem talking about the liability issue.
Right.
Of course there's issues with this. Even people who believe in the vaccine are going to tell you there are going to be some people who are going to have an issue with it. Even possible
51% of the American public is the latest.
So how in the world can we, unless there is a bigger agenda, there's no logical reason why
Scientific reason
you would ever vaccinate somebody with known side effects with an mRNA, which again, we've never been done before. It's a human experiment, literally putting foreign proteins into the human body for a virus, which is a 0.1% fatality rate. And that
hasn't even been isolated in a human.
So I'm just saying think about risk reward is, I guess, my best advice to the people.
I would just think about the truth.
Yeah, so if it hasn't been isolated, is it really there?
Well, that's what you brought up. It's amazing that we were able to come up with a vaccine. And
for something that's not proven.
Well, some people say the reason why they couldn't come up with a typical vaccine, which creates an antigen to an antibody, like most other vaccines are, is because they know what those viruses are that they're creating an antigen for, because they take the bit of the virus, they attenuate it, or they partially kill it or totally kill it. So they take a virus, which is sequenced, they kill it, Then they inject it in with a bunch of detergents and other preservatives like aluminum and some other things, and they put it back in your body. Your body creates an antibody response. They couldn't do it with this one because they haven't sequenced the vaccine, so they couldn't make that type of a vaccine. So they had to do an mRNA vaccine for this.
Well, and what we want to say is, are there people dying? Definitely. Are there people that get sick, man, and they get way more sick than they have been with typical influenza? Yeah. So there are people getting infected. Do we know what it is? Well, SARS-CoV-2 hasn't been isolated. There is something going on out there.
Right.
There's no question about that. There are people getting sick, but the bottom line is healthy people don't get sick. People that have weakened immune systems, comorbidities, these are the people that get sick. I think it's 85% are asymptomatic, or it's over 90% are asymptomatic. And if you do get something, man, you could, I've talked to people, their body hurts, they felt like they want to die. They're like completely sick, and it's been 10 days and it was way worse than the flu. We're not denying any of that. And we're not denying that people have died with something. But the PCR test is completely inaccurate. Any epidemic, the CDC automatically, they isolate it to know what they're dealing with, and none of that's been done. So this whole thing is a big question.
Not only that, but I want to remind people that the whole lockdown measures, what it's doing to the economic of the population, what it's doing to the family dynamic, how there's an increase in domestic violence. There's an increase. Again, I lost a patient 3 weeks ago, killed himself from fentanyl, who lost a job and was in a state of despair, likely because of the COVID lockdown. So we are disrupting and destroying people's lives. And again, if this is due to an agenda, which we believe there is one, then it is one of the most tragic things that has ever been done to the
in history
population.
Yeah, millions of people.
So we're not making light of the people that have died. That's a reality. But
we are saying what's really going on here,
and how many more lives are being caused ill, and how many more lives are going to be
How many are going to be put in question?
Right, because of this. Go ahead, Dr. Fred.
Well, the real thing is how we started this also. We're here to provide information so you have the confidence and courage to stand up for your rights. And the bottom line is, I'm not telling you to get vaccinated or not vaccinated. I'm telling you there's no way in hell anybody in this room is getting it. And if you believe any of this and you can research this yourself, then I would hope that you wouldn't get it. So the thing is to be able to understand, have the information, have the confidence and courage to be able to say, I'm not doing it. Because there's jobs, there's companies that will say you have to do it. If you're in the medical profession, there are certain professions, first responders, where there's careers where people are going to say you have to get vaccinated. And so if you don't want to be any part of this, then here's an opportunity to be able to stand up for your rights, to be able to say no, maybe you have to change your life. You have to make that decision.
See, your shirt says?
You are more powerful than you think.
So I love that shirt because this goes back to the question. Louis Pasteur said it. He said, it is all about the soil, not the seed. He said that germs, viruses, bacteria, fungi, they are merely opportunistic vectors of disease. They themselves are not the cause of disease. So what does that mean? That means that we are more powerful. That means if we can get the terrain, our body, if we can be healthy, then this virus will be a non-issue to the healthy. So why aren't we preaching health to the population? Things like chiropractic care, things like vitamin D, things like vitamin C and zinc. We can literally protect people. Again, 84% of the people hospitalized for this virus have a substandard vitamin D level, 17 nanograms per milliliter, which is half of what even the medical profession advises us. So there's so much we can do. This is about you and taking an individual stand to protect your health and protect the health of your family.
There you go. On that note, let's take our power back.
There you go.
All right. Love you guys. Subscribe, ring the bell, So, hey, we'll keep your eye on these. We have more exciting podcasts coming up that are really going to open your mind, expand your conscious, and again, give you courage and confidence to be able to say, we're taking a stand. Thanks. Love you guys.
Nice. Good info.